Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening from. Welcome to the Change Management Simplified podcast, where we will explain and discuss what change management is really about, using real examples alongside principles of change management based on our experiences on projects, transformations, change initiatives, and of course, the home experiences as well. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming back to listen to the Change Management Simplified podcast. I'm hoping you're back because you are enjoying the episodes that I'm doing, you're liking them. Please continue to subscribe or to follow on Spotify, on YouTube. I really do appreciate all the viewers, the viewings, the listenings that you are continuing to provide me with. This is good. I'm doing this as a hobby, but seeing that people are following and listening to these episodes really does give me extra encouragement to get up every week and make sure I record a short episode for you on change management plus leadership to help us all share our knowledge. Right. The question in front of me this week came from one of the senior leaders that I work with. And the question was, how do I create and maintain urgency for a change initiative? Now, this is this is probably one of the most difficult activities that I personally come across, and any leader or anyone sponsoring a change would come across. And the reason I say that is that, firstly, creating the urgency is even more difficult because you're trying to convince them from scratch. Maintaining it is even worse because you've got a broader stakeholder group that you have to maintain with the sense of urgency that this change initiative is good for all, will benefit all, and therefore to try and keep the ongoing support. Um, However, keeping that to the side, I'm going to have a little vent or share an experience that I went through for one of the interviews that I went to. A few years ago, about 5, 6 years ago, I went for an interview for a small consultancy firm. This time it's not the Big Four, so I won't have a go at the Big Four. However, I do know the Big Four also have the same kind of approach or assumption. Through the interview process, I had applied for a director role, and within the questions and observations, the interviewer said to me, we will, if we're to move forward, um, we will have to put you down a level because you haven't had experience in working with clients and selling or convincing them of how to sell projects or how to sell work. That response kind of annoyed me, but I was internally annoyed. So I was very firm in my response, and I said to him, I totally disagree with your assumption. I do believe, and I know I have worked in the Big Four, and the assumption is that people from industry or have been working industry don't have selling or convincing or influencing skills because they haven't been working in the consultancy mainstream firms. That is wrong. That is the worst assumption you can have because internally, if you've been working on projects, leading a transformation, or being a program or project manager, you spend most of your time trying to convince and influence senior stakeholders to get buy-in on this, or for this change initiative, but also to keep going and reminding them of why this program or this project is good for them. So for someone who has never worked in industry, and also bear in mind that consultancy firm usually come in after the sponsor or the transformation lead has convinced the executive committee that this project we have to do it. If we don't do it, these are the consequences. They then give you the go ahead to reach out and bring in the external consultancy firms to come and help you. So, how dare you tell me that someone who's been working in industry doesn't have the ability or the capability to convince the client to sell work or to convince them on it to get to a change initiative. I find that absolute nonsense. The meeting we finished, we left it there. But after that, on my way back on the train, I emailed the recruiter, the HR lady, to say, if that's all I'm being offered, I don't want to progress any further with this interview. I wasn't going to be talked down or be demotivated in what my capabilities were. Anyway, putting that to the side, coming back to the initial question, how do you create and maintain urgency for a change initiative? Well, firstly, from my perspective and from my experience, what I do is I'll work backwards. What backwards meaning that one, I need to know, or you need to try and understand what is the goal for this change. Two, then conduct an impact assessment that will allow you to even get in-depth knowledge and understanding of this particular change and the impact it will have on the various stakeholders. Once you have the assessment, the impact assessment, which should include a stakeholder impact assessment, you should then now starting to answer the question of what's in it for them. For them, meaning the impacted stakeholders. If you have these three subcomponents or subtasks in your mind from the beginning, then you can start working backwards. But before you work backwards, the first thing you also need to do for yourself is once you have all this knowledge, you know what the goal is, you've done the impact assessment, you know what's in it, you know how it's going to impact these various stakeholders. You then need to convince yourself whether this is a viable project or change initiative. Does it meet the company objectives? Does it meet also your objective? Do you believe in this change? It's important that you believe in this change. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to sell it or convince anyone else to come on board to try and help you implement this change initiative. So, what do we do? When we go back to the beginning, to help you get through this process, I am going to use the John Kotter 8-step change model, which which is used throughout all the different change initiatives. But for today, I am going to focus on the first step that he actually mentions. You can get more context or more details around the other 7 steps in his Leading Change book, which was published in 1996. So what do you need to do? The first step, actually, to your surprise or to anybody's surprise, is to create a sense of urgency. So this particular senior leader's question wasn't out of the blue, and it's not a new problem. It is a big problem, and it's a reoccurring problem that we have on change initiatives, is that leaders need to create a sense of urgency. For you to be able to do this, you have to do one, convince yourself of the change. So you need to get an understanding of the change. You need to know what is it about, as I mentioned before. Is it viable? Is it value add? Is it in line within this, within the company strategy and objectives? And is it what you believe in that could actually help turn around the company's performance or growth or development agenda? So once you've covered the what, you need to then go into the second step, which is what is the goal? And this is where you then have to address the why and the when, meaning what is the purpose. So you need to know what is the purpose for this change initiative? What is the vision? If you know the purpose and you know the vision, that will help you understand even more why this change has to happen and also the timings for it. What is the best time for you to kick off this change initiative? Is it in line with the market or the industry expectations? For example, if it's a technology or an IT system change initiative, will this technology be still relevant and appropriate in, let's say, for example, 5 years' time when the project or the change initiative is completed, or will it be obsolete and out of date? So you need to have that clarity to be able to come up with a purpose and to understand the purpose and why and when it has to happen. That takes you to our second point, which was conducting an impact assessment. Once you conduct the impact assessment, you will be in a position to get the buy-in of the different stakeholders that are impacted, but also have influence on this project. When you get to know when you're trying to get buy-in, you have to know the objective. So one, we go back a step. You got an understanding of the change. You now know the purpose and therefore the vision. But what are the objectives of actually undertaking this change initiative? You need to be you need to use these objectives to sell the idea to everyone else that impacted, but also those that you want to try and keep on board. You need to understand what opportunities does it bring. What are we losing out at the moment that because we haven't performed this change, and what opportunities will it bring? Secondly, what is the risk of not changing? That is a powerful statement that you can use if you understand the objective of the change. It's therefore important that you invest time in actually reviewing and analyzing the impact assessment that you've been given. Thirdly, you want to know the benefits of the change. All these components will help you sell the idea constructively to every single individual that you talk to, you discuss, that you're trying to get their sense of focus to be able to maintain the change initiative in the urgency criteria, and therefore maybe you don't lose your funding. And then the third point, contributing to your understanding of the change, is for you to know what's in it for them. Now, this means understanding the stakeholders, their needs, their requirements, and also how it might impact them favorably or adversely. Once you understand this, you're trying to get or be in a position to try and encourage them to give you their ongoing support through the project lifecycle. And the way you can go about that is one, involve them in discussions. Make them part of this journey from the very beginning. Don't wait to the very end when you want them to do UAT or transitioning to BAU. If you listen to my previous episodes, that doesn't go down very well and you will face change resistance. Number two, empower them. The way I do this is I would include them in scoping of the requirements from the very beginning, because sometimes they might identify gaps that we haven't picked up on. Now, what some stakeholders do is prepare requirements or scope out requirements in isolation of the impacted functional leads. So they work with the business analysts plus themselves, and then set off to say this is the completed scope requirements. That is the wrong move, and I wouldn't advise anyone to do that, because you don't know how the end users use the end product. So you need to engage them. And the first step for you or the second step in engaging them is involving them in the scoping of the requirements. This leads into my next point of involving them into decision making. Now, how I do this is usually from a project management perspective, or when I'm doing the program manager role. When we've agreed when we've agreed and scoped out the requirements and incorporated them into the PID, which is the project initiation document, I do the rounds of getting each functional lead who's impacted to review the requirements and to confirm stroke sign off that they're happy with the requirements that have been documented. This is important because we have to hand over this document to, for example, the IT system guys or the process guys, who then I have to work with to make sure the right configuration or requirements are met. However, it's not easy getting sign off from them. If you've tried this before, I'm sure you're laughing or chuckling away, because as much as they want to be involved, they also don't want to be involved in actually taking ownership and accountability. And I say these are the functional leads who have been contributing to the scoping of the requirements. So you cannot win in either way, whether you involve them or not. However, you just have to involve them and force sign off, because this is a collaborative team effort, and it's important that they also have ownership and accountability of what's being configured or what's being requested to configure, because this is them again reaffirming that they are on board, but two, they've incorporated any feedback from an end user perspective that will then make sure that we provide a fit for purpose output or end user system. So but it's not easy to get them to do that. I find that one of the challenging things to have on a project is to get sign off from the functional lead. I know it's time consuming and some of you prefer not to do that. However, I would strongly encourage it because it also it also encourages teamwork and collaboration between the project team, but also the end user team. And this is what you need because you get the best out of the project when you've got both sides working together, collaborating, and exchanging ideas, or just working together and having that 360 feedback. And how do you maintain this? Well, as I said before, easy word, it's a very tiny word, maintain, however, is the hardest one to actually achieve throughout this whole process, which means that you have to continuously practice every single step that we've spoken about or mentioned in this episode throughout the whole project life cycle. You have to ensure that, or this will help you ensure that one, your project is still at focus point. You know, the EC or the executive committee, don't forget about it, because one of the challenges that we have with the executive committee or senior leadership team is that they tend to forget about projects. Not to forget, but to put the projects, long-term projects, let's say 3 to 7 years, on the back burner and not put them on their must wins. This is wrong. And this is not the best approach. You need to keep this long-term project on your must-wins. You have to ensure that you have achievable milestones that you aim to achieve every single year to ensure that we see progress, or the executive committee sees progress, the end users see progress, and they're still, engaged while the project is progressing throughout the duration of the project. The reason I say that because I've observed it several times, at least in the last 5 years or so. I've observed it about 3 times on different projects where the EC has only, woken up to the fact that the project is in trouble a year and a half before it goes live. This is a 7-year project or a 5-year project. That's way too late. And that's because it was never put on their must wins and they were putting on other projects. So it's important that you maintain continuously the urgency and the focus of your project to ensure you get the right attention. 2, you are proactively involved in any strategy changes or vision changes for the company and be able to react to those and be able to adapt, one, maybe to your program management style, but also to the objectives of the project if something drastically changes. So it's important you maintain your project in focus. It's good for you and it's good for the project. And for the EC to continuously ignore this big program on their books, I personally don't understand it. They're spending millions every single year for, let's say, for 5 to 7 years, and they only put this project on the must wins for the last year and a half. That's where our AC, our executive committees, fail us, and we've got to do better than that. But also, you as the transformation lead or the sponsor, it's your priority to make sure your project is is in focus and is still treated as urgent, and therefore you get the right dedication of support, budget, and priorities. And on that note, thank you for listening. In the next episode, I will address the same question, but from a personal, normal life perspective. How do we apply the same question in our normal life activities? Hope to see you next week. Thank you. If you find this podcast beneficial or interesting, please press follow, like, or subscribe. Lastly, and of course, don't forget to spread the word by sharing. Thank you for listening.